I'm guessing lots of people here have already read some of Jerry's books. Show of hands. How many people would have read? And M would be the number one. So how many people have read? Wow. Practically every hand in the room is up. Awesome. All right, great. So we'll get started and people can keep joining as we proceed. To open, I want to just give an introduction to Jerry. A lot of you know of him and a lot of you have read his work, but it's really a lot of different kinds of things that Jerry does, from poetry to writing original stuff to translations. So I'm just reading from the back of his most recent book, The Education of Yuri. Because Jerry is a writer and poet based in Mumbai. His books include the novels M in the Big Home, which won the Hindu and the Crossword Book Award, Murder in Mahim, winner of the Value of Words Award and shortlisted for the Crossword Award, and the non-fiction book Helen, The Life and Times of an H-Bomb, winner of the National Award for the Best Book on Cinema. The two books on poetry are I Want a Poem and Other Poems and Asylum. His books for children include A Bear for Felicia, When Crows Are White, Tickle Me, Don't Tickle Me, and his edited volumes include A Book of Light, When a Loved One Has a Different Mind, and Bombay Meri Jaan, Writings on Mumbai, with Naresh Fernandez. As a translator, he's also translated many works from Marathi. I'm not going to read out the whole list here, but he has, most importantly, in 2016, he received the Wyndham Campbell Prize and also the Sahitya Academy Award. So long list of accomplishments there, Jerry. And so we'll jump straight into the questions. The format we'll follow is like we always do, folks, where I will ask a few questions. And after that, we'll open it up to all of you folks, and whatever questions you have, Jerry will be answering them. Your questions need to come into the chat, and I'll be moderating the questions. So if there's repetition or if there's, so we can just keep it streamlined. So my first question I've read, so there is, of course, M in the Big Boom, which is his recent book, which is when I first had an opportunity to meet him in Delhi. And then, and there is M in the Big Boom. So Education of Yuri, M in the Big Boom. And those are the two books that we will be focusing on. The first one is M in the Big Boom. And I'm in love with that book. And what I remember most from that book, I read it a few years ago, but what I remember most from the book are the letters. And they're so beautiful. The love letters that, M and the Big Boom, they write to each other. So I was just wondering, did you make them up? Or was it like a British Bridges of Madison County type of thing where you actually found a stash of letters that they wrote to each other?
Actually, there were many letters that my mother wrote to my father, and very few that he'd written to her. But I thought to invade actually their letters would not be fair. So I invented the letters, but I stayed within the bounds that had been created by the letters that they sent each other. So the entire book is fiction in the sense that the letters, the diary entries that happen at some point, all those, there were diaries, there were letters, but those weren't, maybe one day, I don't know, when I feel less vulnerable, I might put those out into the public sphere. But right now the challenge was to try and get into the skins of two very different, and to say what they're saying. So a friend of mine just this morning was telling me about Keats's negative capability comment on Shakespeare. And I presume that every writer actually wants to try that out, see whether they can inhabit the skin of another person who is not like them, and to produce them from within that skin an entire body, flesh, bone, sinew, muscle, and then movement, animation, see whether you can put a soul into that being and to make them come alive, and then press them out into words and put them into a piece of paper again. So yes, there were letters, but no, they weren't the letters that you read in M in the Big Boom.
And this brings up a related question, because I know that it's very close to being a memoir, yet you've got it in the genre fiction. Is that right? So why that choice when it is a memoir? Why are you choosing to categorize it as fiction?
It's not a memoir so much as it is an account of a way that a life was lived.
Okay.
But there were two reasons, I think, to make it fiction. One was that when it got difficult to write, I could always say to myself, Jerry, this is about the Mendises. Just do your work and write about the Mendises. This is not an account of your family. And the second was also, I think, something to do with the fact that life does not yield easily to the processes and demands of fiction. So fiction requires you to do something very different, which is, I think, in some ways, I felt a cage had been created. And each reader who starts reading M in the Big Room finds themselves in that cage. And at the end, the duty of the writer is to open the cage to let the reader go again. So in real life, it was my mother who lived for many years after my father did. And those were not happy years. And therefore, in fiction, I reversed this and I let the character called M die. I gave her a quiet, peaceful death in her bed. I let all the readers out of that door. I showed them the way in which I hope, when a dominant character moves on, how everybody is kind of a little stranded, a little like you don't know how you're supposed to deal with this new emptiness that there is. And so I think for those two reasons, it had to be fiction because it did not follow fact. And it was an attempt at keeping myself sane as well.
Cool. Yeah. So after, I mean, fiction, after M, anything that you write, anything that follows M would be a tough act. It would be a challenge for a writer. Did you think much about that? Was there a lot of pressure on you, or were you just on to the next thing?
No, even before M came out, I was already writing many other of the things that have come out, or working on many of the other things. And Chetan, fundamentally, almost everything that I did was about there was one aim at the base of it, which was my freedom, right?
Okay.
So one gave up, well-paying jobs. One gave up the rat race. One decided that one would sit at home and write. And all that was so that I could get up in the morning and say to myself, Jerry, what is it you want to do today? And then get on and do that. I would, and a lot of the things that I've chosen to do or not to do have cost me something, in the sense that, you see other people getting on in their careers, you see them earning a lot of money, you see lots of good things happening with that. But my aim has always been that I should get up in the morning and determine the course of my day for myself. That seemed like the most beautiful thing to aim at. And I have not never regretted it, but 99% of the time I don't regret any choices that I made. Now, I am not going to allow a piece of writing that I did to also limit my freedom and my choices.
Brilliant.
So
Awesome.
I had a friend who actually said, you shouldn't write anything more after this. You should just, because, this is the most magnificent book that I've read, and I don't think you're ever going to get better than this. And I thought that was a compliment to M and an insult to me, both at the same time, and both beautifully and efficiently delivered. And that is what one expects from friends often. But I determined that if I felt like writing, I would write. And expectations and what people think and how the reception of a new book is going to be is not my concern. It's not going. If it were to be my concern, then I would probably want to write bestsellers, because those are the people who are concerned with audience reception, are concerned with how many copies sell, are concerned with whether they are hitting the right marks at the right point in time, whether they have the pulse point of the market. These have not been my concerns. I'm not denigrating them. I'm just saying those are not my concerns. So then, if many people have stumbled on the Education of Yuri as of the first book that they've read by Jerry Pinto, and have liked it, enjoyed it, responded to it in various ways. One young person wrote that it was exactly the story of her life, and she's 23 and just out of college. And so I'm so relieved to see that the Education of Yuri has had a life that is involved in some ways with Them in the Big Room, because it's by the same writer, but it's also independent. So that's the best possible situation.
So talking about the Education of Yuri, so I'm not born and raised in Bombay, but I've spent about 5 years in Bombay. And a lot of the things that you talk about, I was there in the late 90s. And a lot of the places that you talk about, which I know some of them don't even exist anymore. So there's Crystal, Samovar, Strand, even Mahim. I've lived in Mahim also in a rental flat shared with 4 people. So I love how they seamlessly fit into the narrative without getting in the way. They don't feel forced. They're not like pressured or put there. So did that just happen? Did you want all these places in the narrative? Because it helps the connection, I think, for somebody who knows the places.
Yeah, a lot of it is I don't know, it's unconscious planning in a way. So it's not like you say to yourself, okay, now how can I bring chords of memory in my mature readers by reminding them of the 1980s.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
I worked very carefully around that. But you do try when you're looking back at and sort of plotting the way you're going to work at a book. There are things that ring bells for you. It's not just bells, they strike plangent chords somewhere. They're about memory, they're about desire, they're about loss. There are places where scenes of great intensity were staged and concealed. Because Bombay is always about intensity and concealment. You're trying to love and you're trying to make war and you're trying to grow and you're trying to do all this with a million eyes on you all at once. So the struggle is almost inevitably spills onto the place. It's not a concealed, it's not a hermetic kind of struggle. It's like every time I walked into to Samovar for the many years after I was out of college, many strong memories came back of going there with people, going there without people, having someone walk out on you in rage from leaving a dish uneaten, and you're thinking, I'm going to have to eat that now because it'll get wasted otherwise, and I'm not paying for this. All the kinds of things that young people our generation lived very, very impoverished economic lives in the sense, I think, Chetan, and I'm sorry I'm including you in my generation.
No, we are the same generation. We're very close.
Yeah. So it is not as if like we got pocket money on a regular basis or anything like that. You have to actually make your money, right? I mean, so every 25 rupees that you put down on something was 25 rupees that you had earned, right? So in making Yuri an economic agent, like giving him tuitions to go to, making him worry about how he's going to live and manage his life, I thought I was evoking a time and a place when these things were not just taken for granted. That young people these days seem to think nothing of going to barista every so often for a cup of coffee, and then of course they complain that books are expensive. I feel like saying 180 rupees for a cold coffee, boss. You go to the roads around Churchgate, you'll get 4 books for that, and they'll last you forever. And you can go home and make yourself a cup of fairly decent coffee and sit and read them. But those are your priorities, not mine.
Great,
So
that's
no,
awesome.
I don't think I planned very clearly a nostalgic snap of Bombay. But what I did want to do was remind myself, I think, of a younger version of myself flailing in the avenues of the city.
Very cool. That's really that was. I think that frame or that lens is really interesting because you're right. I have children. They don't seem to think money, is really a factor. It's like let's do this and we go and do it. So there is a there is a big thing to be said about that. I have a lot of questions about Yuri, which I'm not going to ask because I don't want to give out spoilers. But I did want, in general, this group, there's lots of writers who are trying to say something deep or something. They're trying to convey a message. And then there's writers who are just trying to tell a great story. And we often discuss that, amongst the writers, amongst the group also. So when you're trying to write something, what's driving it? uh, I know you're always telling a great story, but do you think of message and all of that stuff, or is it just I just want to tell what I want?
I think in some ways it is a message because I've been lucky, right? So when I have a message, then I do journalism. Right? I can write a column and I can say this is my opinion, boss, and then you can take me on that level, right? When you're doing now, those opinions will inform your writing, prose or the poetry or the novels that you're writing. That will bring the entire buffet of the self. It's really that one can manage to bracket off a part of yourself and say, that's not what's going to be let into this work. But the rational, radical, may I put off the video? Someone's complaining that the audio is not clear.
Yeah, you can turn off the video if you'd like.
Okay. So the rational and argumentative Jerry Pinto will turn up in the essays, in the opinion pieces for the newspapers. The subversive Jerry Pinto, who wants perhaps to share a story that are associated with that story, will turn up in the novels and in the. So that's subversive, and because I hope that those messages are so deeply buried that they don't actually surface as messages. They just trailer pointers, and those points. For instance, very remark on how many there are Muslims and Christians and Northeasterners and all those people who generally don't show up in it's like a Muslim story, Muslim. So I think I don't think that was I planned it either. Is the audio still not clear?
It's a little in and out. Keep going. I mean, we're getting the gist of what you're saying. I'll be power through. Hopefully, it'll get better.
Okay. I'm going to try to walk around and see whether you get better sound somewhere else. Is
actually the sound is better
now?
now? Yes, it is.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to sit in another place. Any better now?
Sort of in and out still. It's not so great.
Okay, is it better now?
Yeah.
Here? Yeah? Yeah, okay. So this means I'm standing strangely in one part of the room, but it's okay. Anything for. So I have the feeling that what such messages as they are, I am relying really on the goodwill of the readers and on the intensity and clarity of reading. That there is a terrible tendency now to talk about TBRs, about the number of books that one has read during the course of a year, and to be almost out of that number. And therefore, this kind of reading may often mean that intensity of reading is lost because people want to read a large number of books. And two things I think happen. One is that people consciously choose shorter books, which is not bad. You can find some very beautiful short books, and they read at an astonishing clip. just whisking past pages. And I often feel it's very sad and almost insulting to a writer who may have spent 2 years on a book if you choose not to give some quality time to the book and to its reading. So I really rely on the reader to see the message, such message as there is. And really, eventually, I have found there's no way you can predict what message the reader is going to take away from the book. Every reader brings a fresh and delightful new reading. That I think is part of the joy of, say, maybe encountering readers at festivals or us having them write to you on social media and tell you what your book is about. It means that they have possessed the book. They have taken it into themselves and they have made it part of themselves. And in that sense, you then get a new book entirely. And that is the wonder and the joy of reading. Yeah, I think that's why we are all in this business, because readers are different from us. And therefore, each reading is a reinvention of a book.
Thank you. Thanks for that. So last question, and then I'll open it out, is really about the tone in the two books. M has a sense of foreboding through the entire book. It's almost like, you know that something not so happy is going to happen in the end. Yuri is full of angst and uncertainty of a young boy, and I felt it was overall brighter. One was dark and smoldering, and the other was tentative and unsure, even in the third person, although it's not written in first. Even then, that comes through. So, was that just the nature of the stories, or is that something that you think was a conscious intent? How did you even realize that?
I don't know, Chetan. I mean, I could invent a story for you because that's what we do as writers, right? We invent stories. And it is nice to invent a story rather than to say quite pathetically that you don't know what you're doing while you're doing it, right? You just are like, you're building this bridge and walking at the same time, and you don't know where this bridge is going some days. And your characters are behaving so badly. They say the most ridiculous things, and you think, did not give you that backstory. Where are you coming from? They interact with each other in extremely difficult ways. And then at the end of it, there is a reader who comes in and tells you that, there is a foreboding, a grim foreboding hanging over M. And yeah, I suppose now that I think about it, yeah, I mean, if you have a mother who is trying to kill herself at fairly regular intervals, you are tense. And but at the same time, I hope that there was some humor in the book, and there was some, some just happy moments. Because if we were grimly tense and foreboding, in fact, I think poor Yuri is in such a terrible state throughout most of the book, because he has no, like, I mean, right down to his underwear, he's kind of
That's
like
true.
worried.
Yeah.
Everything worries the poor lad. Yeah. And in some ways, I think he doesn't know it, but he's a fairly privileged boy. He's getting an education. He speaks English. He speaks it well. He's actually made a friend in the first. So I think really, okay. I had no choice about writing M. I had to put it down at some point. At some point, that had to be done. I don't think I could have written any other stories after, if I hadn't written that. With Yuri, the choice was, I really thought I was talking about loneliness. That it's an it's okay. Some of us grow up in families where everybody is intelligent and vibrant and vital, and but my family tends to be very like, other than my immediate family, the rest of the family is very, very gone, very ordinary, very intent on talking about the levels of humidity in the air, the heat of May, the shortage of mangoes, the drips from the tiles. And there are times when you're listening to this conversation and you love these people. It's not like you don't, but you're just thinking, God save me. Can we talk? Can I talk philosophy to somebody? Okay. And of course, you're completely ill-equipped to talk philosophy when you're 14 to anybody because you don't have a philosophy. But you still long for someone about whom you can talk abstractions. Okay. So that is for Yuri's fate that he's struggling to go out and find himself. And I think in the process he stumbles on bits of himself. But I think what all of us discover now, Chetan, everyone here will discover is that nobody discovers themselves. It's just a lifelong thing. You just keep on stumbling into new corners and dark areas and thinking, oh God, is that who I also am? But there are also moments of great brightness and hope. So
those are brilliant. Nobody ever discovers themselves. I think that's very true. You're always stumbling from one thing to the next. So it's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm going to open it out to questions. There's already a lot of questions in the chat.
Sure.
Before I go, I do want to say that I wish I had somebody like Theo Julio to take care of me when I was a kid. Such a beautiful character.
Thank you so much. I think Theo Julio is like in some very strange way, both the Big Whom and Theo Julio are the man I hope to grow up to be. And if you have got to 56 and you have not become either of those men, you know how hopeless this endeavor is. It's not going to happen, boss.
Well, but you are still discovering yourself, so you never know, you might.
This is true. Okay. Yeah. Questions.
All right. So the first question was, how do you deal with vulnerability as a writer for any memoir or autobiography?
You know what? How do you deal with vulnerability? You deal with it by weeping. Like, I mean, it is, and I don't mean to. I'm not being dismissive of the question. What I'm saying is that really writing, when you're doing anything that is meaningful, right? You're actually saying, look at my sores, look at my scabs, look at my wounds. This is who I am. I'm so ordinary. I'm so everyday. No, no, I think it's a lovely question. I'm actually struggling to answer it. And here I thought I had all the answers taped. Okay, but I think what you do is if you stand up and you are vulnerable, when you're writing it, you're just thinking, no, Jerry, don't say it, don't say that, don't say that. Then you're in the groove, you're in the right place to be. So when you feel literally almost ashamed of what you are saying and what you're telling people, or you're cringing at what is happening with your words, that may be a good place to be. That's as much as because I think no one wants to be vulnerable. Right? My belief that India is in such an angry mood these days is because we are very, very deeply hurt, and we fear things. And instead of fearing these things and admitting to fear and to hurt, we want to use rage instead. And rage is not the way forward. So when you say to yourself, when you say to yourself, I am weak and I'm afraid, then you are saying I'm weak. When you say I am afraid, you are saying I'm weak. When you say I'm angry, you're saying I'm strong. And you feel more comfortable being angry than you feel being weak. So for me, I try to watch myself, and some watching inevitably throws up really horrible stuff, like things that you're deeply uncomfortable with. But that is the nature of watching. Yeah. Next question.
Thank you for that.
I'm so sorry. This is a very bad answer, but if a better answer comes up at some point, I'll try and get in touch. And I mean, this is what I can think of right now.
Sure. Yeah. I want to skip Michelle's next question, move to size, which is a long question, part statement, but I'll read it out. Your writing has a visceral quality. Both of your books have impacted me. I've had a close friend break down on the phone after reading them. I saw her take care of her schizophrenic mother in her final days. Yuri was a book I wish I had written for the way I related to the times, standing in Strand bookstall and dying to pick up a book that one couldn't afford in college. Your dialogue writing is really special and feels so integral to the way the world of characters can be imagined. But this is a very Indian way of looking at things, especially the use of the vernacular. Okay, so that's an observation. There is no question. I thought there was a question. Next question was, is it necessary to read a lot of books before you start writing?
Oh, necessary meaning I don't think you should even. Why would you want to write if you don't read? No, I thought like the only reason why you want to write at all is because you've been a reader for so long. You've seen all these books on your shelves, and you want your book on a spine. I mean, your name on a spine of a book somewhere, sometime. So of course it's necessary. It's reading. Uh, Reading is breathing. For a writer, reading is breathing. It's beyond necessary. It's fundamental. Lots, hundreds of books. Okay, for every book you write, you'll probably read 300, 500 books. That's a good ratio.
Fair enough. All right. Next question. Do you give your drafts to friends for feedback and critique to get different perspectives of how different people will perceive your books? Or is it just Ravi?
Oh, no, no. Before I inflicted on Ravi, there is a reader called Jerry Pinto who reads the book again. So I give it like a month or two before after I finished a novel, and then I look at the novel myself. And that, I believe, is something that we have to do as writers. We have to send out our book in the best possible shape to anybody else. Because, if you think about editors read piles and piles of books. They have poisoned their love of reading by making it a profession, right? So there's so much that passes their tables that at some point they must also feel a bit sick. I'm sure they probably do detox editors vacations where they don't read at all, and that must seem like such a delightful time. I know I go on vacation with piles of books to read, right? But they must be just like detoxing by not reading. So you have to send your book in the best possible way. So I'm that first reader. And after that, it depends. For a novel, I send it out to a couple of friends, yes. Poetry to other friends. But in general, I'm becoming less and less um, dependent on their feedback, and more interested in what, because I think, without knowing it, we all become gatekeepers for other people. And especially with poetry, I think if the poems don't seem like the poems I would write, then I'm uncomfortable. So I'm relying now very clearly more on myself and then on yeah.
All right.
Next.
Great. I'm going to sort of skip Shalini's question. She's asked, does one write for the market or do you write for yourself? And I think you've already answered that. The next question is, what's your writing routine and how do you deal with writer's block? Does your inspiration for writing ever take a backseat and life takes off?
See, I write every day. I try to write every day, which means that there is often a time when I get up and I go to my table and I look down at the paper and I look at the pen and I think, why did I do this to myself? Why am I doing this? But I write anyway. I'm blocked. I hate what I'm writing. I find the words are terrible. They are labored. They are purple prose. Everything is wrong with them. But I know that if I do not write at this moment, and if I do not keep on pushing through, at that point, I see myself as an icebreaker with ice floes blocking me. And I need to keep pushing through those ice floes, powering my way through them. And suddenly, without knowing it, I'm out in clean water, clear water again. The good thing about writing is that the bad stuff can then just be cancelled out. It can be edited. You can tear up those pages. You can delete it from Microsoft or from whatever software you're using, and simply keep the good stuff behind. But if you don't do the bad stuff, you won't get to the good stuff. So uh, my solution for writer's block is writing. It is not writing that comes with joy. It is not writing that you like doing, but it is writing that you are doing to heal the writer's block. You're just saying, okay, there's something in the way here, but I'm pushing past that something, because to me, writing is important. It is central. It is worthwhile doing. It is always going to be worthwhile doing, even when I don't want to do it. And so I become a very stern parent to myself, and I say, Jerry, do your writing. As simple as that. Jerry, just sit down and write. Sometimes I'm a gentle parent. I say, Jerry, 10 lines, 10 lines only. Finish the end, come to the end of this page, and then you can go. Huh? Please. Then I say, when I finish those 10 lines, come on, one more page, one more page, one more page. And I actually urge myself on. And I have a 500 to, in all the writing that I do a few thousand words a day, because there's translation to be done, editing. So a lot of words will get done, but there's a number of words that I set myself as a target every day. And when I finish that, I kick back and I am my own boss again. I can be free to do anything I want. Watch Netflix or go for a walk or hang out with friends, but first the writing. Always first the writing.
When you were talking as the parent, I really missed having the video on. That would have been very cool. But we'll move to the next question. So what is a good day of writing look like for you? Vinita is asking, what is your process?
I think a good day of writing is like I've done some work on a novel. Okay, the ideal day. Ideal days I've done some work on the novel, and the ephemeral moment of writing a poem has actually become a few lines of a poem. I've done some translation, I've had a nap, I've gone to the gym, I've done my yoga, I've done some meditation and breathing practice. I've been, I've hung out with a person I love, and I've had a good meal. That's as much as I ask from an ideal day. It's a lot, it's a big ask. So I have to make do generally with good days. So if one or two of these things happen, it's a good day. But all of these things will be tried through the course of the day. I will try to do some poetry. I will try to write my novel. I will try to do some translation. Try to hang out with the person I love. Try to call, at least chat to a friend on the phone. All these things. If I can put 4 or 5 of these pieces of the jigsaw on the table, then I see that design as a good day. And some days I have to make do with 2 or 3. Some days one shining moment will get me through the day. What can I say?
Okay, cool. We're getting inundated by questions. Very picking a little bit. So next question is, does working on translations influence your approach when you're writing your own stories?
Yes, indeed, always. I think, okay, there is some, I think I'm often asked this question about who is the Jerry Pinto? Like, is Jerry Pinto the poet more important than Jerry Pinto the translator, than Jerry Pinto the fiction writer? And I feel like saying there is one well, okay? There is one well from which the water is being drawn, right? And every time you go to the well with a bucket and you drop the bucket into the well is changed as well, right? So what you draw from the well, so I always feel the bucket is intention. How have you gone to the well? Have you gone to the well with the thing, make me rich? Have you gone to the well saying, make me a better person? Have you gone to the well saying, give me the Nobel Prize? I'm not saying any of these is the wrong thing, but each, like that intention bucket that you drop into the well will change the water in the well and will change you. There are no hermetically sealed compartments in which translation comes out of a certain vocabulary and poetry comes out of a certain mindset and novels come out of a certain desire for self-expression. It's all the same, plasma state from which you're drawing. Yeah.
Oh, right. Next question is from Lata. She says, when you wrote the character of M, how did you so effectively get into her head, especially the times when the thoughts were so powerful? Was this a product of research or observation or imagination?
Uh, Research, yeah, I suppose I did. I mean, in the sense that one did one's research without thinking it was research. One has, I used to do a lot of reading of 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 psychological books and books about the mind and all, because I was so frightened that something would happen to me. It wasn't about trying to understand uh, very honestly. I have to say that it was actually about being frightened that, okay, is the audio
It's
my video?
patchy again a little bit. It's dragging.
Okay, so I'll put it off again. Sorry about that.
Yeah, yeah.
The research came out of my deep reading and engagement with mental health issues, which were really an outcome of my fear that I was going to go mad one day. Otherwise, it was based on all the things that I'd experienced in my life. And so it was not, the difficult thing was what you left out, because there was so much to left out
Mm.
to put in, so much that could be put in, so many wonderful moments, so much exciting conversations, so many exciting conversations. So it was about editing it down. I think the original was about 700,000 words, and it came down to about 130. Yeah.
700,000 words, really? My God.
Yeah. But I
That's a
generally
lot of
overwrite
editing.
almost everything. I over like a Yuri, I think I wrote about 500,000 words, and then I cut it down.
But
I
that's like
give myself
5x. That's huge.
liberty. I give myself liberty to just write everything that I want down. And I know sometimes I'm going off on a tangent and I say, Chalo, let's see what this tangent has to do. It might have something to say. I just go there. I'm not a very disciplined writer in that sense. I'm disciplined in that I try to write every day. I'm not disciplined in the sense that I won't get in the way of the words as they come. And then again, the discipline of editing kicks in, and I'll see where the story actually is and cut out all the rest. Yeah.
Okay, Nandini has a question. She says, I read an interview where you say that you began writing M when you were 16, and the version we've read now was completed more than 20 years later. You've talked about what changed. You let go of the idea of art as cathartic and focused on writing a novel, going from one to the other, still with your story that draws from your own experience. Did anything in particular change in your process when you sat down to write to make this happen?
I think anything in particular is everything changed. And the central change was I changed, right? I grew up. It's simple. The first few drafts were moans of despair. They were self-pitying. Oh, what a terrible life I have, that my mother is mental, and oh, woe is me, and everyone should be sorry for me. I was like, the terrible stuff, right? I mean, because that's who you are. You're solipsistic, egoistic maniac. You're a 14-year-old boy thinking he's going to write a novel and thinking he's going to capture big sort of issues like psychology and philosophy, and not even just elements of that, but all of it in his trap, in his net, because that's who you are. And I don't think people should be any other way. It's a 14-year-old, you should have grand plans and aims. And as a 40-year-old, you know that you can write a short novel, a decent story. And when it goes out into the world, and when the alchemy and magic of reading happens, it will become a bigger thing. But you have to rely on readers to make it a bigger thing. You're not doing the big work. The readers do the heavy lifting.
Great, thank you for that. Next question is, how do you fictionalize real life? How do you put yourself out there while also escaping the damn I? How to write authentically of other people, and how to write of a life that is far from what you're actually living, like an imagined reality. And he says that I want to say that I'm in the Big Home is a religious book for me. I read it in one go and simply cried, and I return to it every time I remember why I wrote it. Thank you so, so much. But the first part of the question was the statement was a question.
I think thank you very much for for what you said. It is a very, very beautiful thing. And the question about how you know, um, see, I think young people these days have headphones on most of the time, and headphones cut you off from the rest of the world. It is, I understand that it's a ploy for young women, for instance, it's a way of keeping unwanted attention at bay, right? You don't want to engage because so many times when you have engaged in good faith, you have been hurt or you have been, sort of invaded. I get it. But for me, listening to people and listening to conversations is central. It's always like, and often you hear a bit of a story, not the whole of the story, just a line that flashes in your head. And it is good that you don't hear the rest of the story, because then you are allowed to imagine it. When you get the whole story, when someone tells you the whole story, you're trapped in that story, you're locked there. But if someone gives you just a line or two, it's enough fodder to start another process. So one of the things that I try to do is to take the everyday experience and make that part of the world of writing. And of course, there's the experience of the self, right? I mean, there's the interior self, which is also a very rich place to go. As long as you can confront that with a measure of honesty, and which is why I think journaling is a very important thing for everybody to do. I think we should all be writing some form of journal, but it shouldn't be just an account of the day's events. It should be much more a look at the antarakash, what is going on inside your head. Hmm?
Cool, great. Thank you. There's a related question, so I'm going to jump to that one and then come back to these. That is from Nibras, where he's asking, how do you get into the headspace of a character of the opposite gender? Any pointers on doing that with an appreciate degree of fidelity?
The thing is, I really don't think of gender um, as important. I think of the whole character as important. So it's not as if you want to see, these days one has to be a little more careful because people are talking about cultural appropriation, right? So would I create a female character and talk through the female character? I did that already with them, right? But I had some, I suppose, some, what's the word for it? Rights to that because it was my mother. Now, would I do it again? I'm not sure. I think if you look at the way that men and women and others of other genders interact with each other, you'll find that there are certain patterns which you're noticing because you've been trained to notice them by the amount of romantic films we have seen, the amount of comedies we have seen, the amount of media we have consumed. So it would be much, much richer to actually pay attention when a woman's talking, if you're a man asking this question, and to shut your mouth and listen with care and attention, and to pay attention to other things besides which, like other little nuances that suggest that she may not be telling you everything, she may have stopped short, and to encourage and open spaces for those conversations. And because the only, people keep talking about research, but my entire contention is research is other people. That's what research is. And the only way we can do this, because we are actually parasiting on them, we are absorbing them, is to be deeply respectful of them for sharing with us. So respectful parasitism, I think, is the answer. Okay.
That's got to be a new oxymoron. Okay, we have time for maybe 3 more questions. Next one, I don't know if you'll have an answer. Which is the book that you loved in recent times that you wish that you had read?
Oh, I'm telling you a book that I think, the book that I loved in recent times is Guns, Land, Caste, Women by Geeta Ramaswamy. I do not wish to have written that book, because then I would have had to live that life. And it was a terrible life and a magnificently interesting life, but a terrible life. But I think every reader should read it. I mean, every writer should read it, because it is also told very quietly. The prose is not ornamental. Um, it is not self-pitying. It is simply a cool narrative of what happened. And I think to do that is really a very, very difficult task. And Geeta Ramaswamy has pulled it off magnificently.
Awesome. Thank you. There's one more question which is quite intriguing, which is how do you know a manuscript is ready and can be shared with the publisher and that it doesn't require any more?
I hate to say this now, because it will sound like I'm being, magical and philosophical and spiritual in the worst kind of sense. But the manuscript generally tells you when it's ready. You know, there is a moment when you try to change something and something resists that impulse, as if it says, "Bas, now done." Okay. This is the point at which you know it's done, and you let it go, but you have to go back to edit it after that. And editing is a different process. It means that the manuscript is still not done, but it is there. So it's, I don't know, it's like editing is like mixing your salad. You've got all your ingredients and now you mix it. I mean, it's an important task. It's really may even be fundamental to the notion of salad making, is how well you can mix a salad. How well you can edit yourself may be fundamental to getting even published. Because suppose you've done the first 5 pages wrong, a reader reading the first 5 pages is going to say this is rubbish and toss it away. And maybe from page 6, your book is really revealing itself, right? So that editing process is really central. Yeah.
Yeah. One more question here says that have you tried translating poetry to poetry or been through a similar experience? What makes a good poetry to poetry translation in your view?
I think centrally, you have to be a poet to do poetry translation. So if you look at A.K. Ramanujan, he's a poet and he did some poetry translation, which is fabulous. I'm from that school. So I have done some poetry translation, which is in the Ant Who Swallowed the Sun, the Varkaris, the Marathi, Abangs of the Marathi women poets from the 13th to 17th century. That's the really long title of the book. And maybe you could check it out and see what you think. I think it does help to be deeply respectful of the original and to be deeply respectful of poetry as well, because a deep respect for the original can militate against poetry if you allow it to take over. So you have to find a path in between.
Okay, great. And I'm going to close with Nandita's question. She says, I write poems and they come from a very personal place and from my experiences. How do I know that it's okay to put it out there for others to read? And how will I know that what I'm writing is worth someone else's time?
Okay, so the first part of that is, are you comfortable putting them out there? Because almost everything that we write is terribly personal. Even when I wrote about Helen or I wrote about Leela, it was personal. So it just seemed that there was a one curtain between me and the reader, because technically speaking, I'm writing about Leela Naidu in Leela Naidu's words, but I'm suddenly inhabiting Leela Naidu. That's a personal moment there. Likewise, writing about Helen, what are the choices that lead you to Helen? That's a personal thing. So when you're writing personal poetry, you have to ask yourself, am I comfortable with people reading it? And if you are uncomfortable, that's a very good reason to keep on. As far as the other one, with are you sure that you can, it's worth other people's time? We never know. This is an answer that we can never know. But you have to be sure that if the poetry came from a good place, that it will find the right readers who will welcome it into their hearts.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Thanks so much for taking the time. Thank you so much. Folks, I'm trying very hard to get Jerry Jerry to come up to the retreat to do a masterclass for us. We haven't nailed dates yet, but Jerry, what I'll do is send you a couple of date options, and if you can tell me what might work for you,
Sure.
then we can plan from there. Yeah, and I just have a couple of minutes. I also want to talk about. We are not spending any time on the tracker today, A, because we have Jerry, B, because today is just the second, so there's not much to look at. But do get your writing going. Please update your word count on a daily basis. And you heard from Jerry, right? He says you have to write every day. So be the cajoling parent, be the coercing parent, but make sure that you sit at your desk and do the work. And that's really the difference, the distance between you and your finished first draft. That's what we're all shooting for.
Are
Thank
you
you,
all
Jerry.
doing first drafts? Are many of you doing first drafts? Okay, this is
yeah.
the most beautiful time in your life. Vinita will tell you also, who is certainly not doing a first draft. But this is the most lovely time because there is nothing around you except yourself. There's no expectation. There's no public persona. There's nothing. There's just you and the unfinished manuscript. So enjoy. I know it's terrible and it feels like an uphill slog and it feels like no one's interested and I'm never going to get published and I'm never going to finish the book. And I don't know why no one gives me any time. I don't get in. No one's paying. Like, I mean, when I'm writing, they come and they say, where is this and where is that? And you're only writing, just come and help with this. All that is going on, I know. But this is also a time you will look back on with great delights, enjoy thoroughly and tremendously, and listen to yourself out there. Just like go for it. When you're writing, just don't think about what mommy is going to say and what your best friend is going to say, and all. Just write. And later you can edit if you really feel that way, but just put it down for now. And maybe all need some more good books. Things that we'd like to read, and we're relying on you to do that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks. Thanks again, Jerry. We'll be in touch. And thank you, everyone. We've had about 65, 68 people here. So it's been great to have all of you. And just so you remember, next weekend is Anushri Chaudhary. She's the author of The Blue Scarf. And she's also the screenwriter for Arya Season 1 and Season 2. So we'll meet back here at 5 o'clock on Sunday next week. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Jerry. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.